Hello, everybody. I'm Erica. It's really an honor to be here. I'm thrilled to be here with all of you. And I guess that's my introduction. I am going to speak for just a few minutes. I guess we, hopefully 15 or 20 minutes about, nutrition. And I just call it healthy and balanced eating. There's not a lot of research or particular foods that I would say that we know particularly boost immunity, but we know so many that help the microbiome in the gut, which is, there's so much more research. So many of you are saying you're going into the medical field, and I think you'll be seeing more and more research on that. So we're starting with a poll, which is, which of the following best describes your nutrition literacy? That means, what do you already know about nutrition? And if you'll play along, it would be awesome. So the first is, I'm confused about which foods are healthy or good for me. Another is, I'm fairly confident about healthy foods. I know how to prepare them. The other is, I know a lot, but applying it is so challenging. Or you might choose, I'm very confident in what to eat and how to eat. Or you might choose, who, me? I'm just a kid. I don't prepare my own food or pay much attention to this stuff. Just be honest, and hopefully you will play along at home. Thank you. Thank you for voting. Oh, good. Here we go. Okay, well, we have a real mix here. So, so all of you could see this. So the biggest two answers were, I'm very confident in what I eat and how to eat. And the other are, I know a lot, but applying is challenging. And, quite an even spread of, I don't really think about this, to I'm confused. So that's good to know who's here. So that's quite a mix. All right, well, I hope to, for those of you who already have strong knowledge, this should hopefully reiterate that, and we'll have a Q&A right after. So I'm going to kind of lickety-split go through a lot of this, but please, afterwards, any questions that you have, I'll be here for you. So the way you eat, I like to spend just a second on saying it's really important. Our bodies respond to routine. And so the sporadic eating schedules are not as good for our overall health. So if we can learn to be more routine, our bodies get in a rhythm, and digestion, etc., go much better. So one of the things is when we eat, and one of the ways you're doing it correctly, I would say, is if you do get those physiological symptoms, like you wake up in the morning and within 2 to 3 hours, your stomach is growling and you're hungry, or if you don't eat, you might get, kind of irritable or a headache. But if you can go all through the morning and you're eating kind of at odd times, then I know that can happen a lot because you're all students and you're staying up at odd hours, then you might be getting out of whack with your rhythm. So one thing that's really healthy and good for our health is eating in routine. So just planting a seed there. And there's no one right way to eat. I wish I could just say, here's the diet, but you're out there already, and you probably know there's keto and paleo, and some people are vegetarian, and some people are non-vegetarian, some people eat microbiotic. There's so many ways. The exciting thing is to eat a healthy diet. But there are some common threads. I also work at the South Asian Heart Center. I might know some of you from that. And we have a mantra, and it's take your meds every day. And that stands for meditation, exercise, diet, and sleep. And I just want to put a little plug in that I'm talking about diet and nutrition, but we don't live in a bubble. And so, of course, if we're not sleeping well, we make different choices. We don't crave broccoli at 2 a.m, right? And if we're not exercising, we're more sedentary, that can affect how our immunity is and our overall health. And so these things all go together. And so we talk about them all together. That's all. I'm gonna move on, as I said, kind of. So this is the overall healthy eating pattern, kind of reiterating what we were saying earlier in the earlier presentation, which was beautiful. This is just recommendations. Include, right? Many of you already know this who are in the confident level, and those of you who are confused, it's really simple. Include a lot of veggies. You can never go wrong with veggies. You can eat as many as you want. And the goal is, I'll show you with the Harvard plate that the other group had, is to eat half your plate veggies. And I know that sounds like a lot, but if you can kind of start inching your way up there, or encourage your family to, you will be in every way reducing inflammation in your body, and that way increasing immunity, and overall health. So increase veggies, increase fruits, and we're talking whole and season, variety of fruits, and we're not talking fruit juice or dried fruit as much, though you can have a little bit of these things, but we're talking about fresh fruit. Whole grains, lean proteins such as fish or chicken are preferred, or plant-based, or of course, if you're vegetarian, any kind of legumes, nuts, seeds, and healthy fats. So the other group was talking about saturated fats aren't all bad, but the thing about fats that we'll get into just briefly is that nothing lives in a bubble. And so even if something we'll say is a good source of monounsaturated fat, it also will have some saturated fat. Even olive oil, you may know, is a really healthy fat. It's a good source of monounsaturated, but it will also have a little unsaturated, which is fine. So we say choose the healthier fats and eat less. Yeah, you guessed it. Eat less sugar. I know we crave it. Eat less sodium. I know we crave it. Restaurant food, just saying that most restaurant food will be very heavy in a lot of these things, and they're not looking out for our health. And refined grains, which means kind of the white flour. You know, we were talking about the whole grain cereal before on the quiz, but suppose it's frosted, I don't know, what's a good Fruity Pebbles, or what's what's a cereal you eat that's like very sugary? Those are refined grains, or white bread, like Wonder Bread. And saturated and trans fats are in the reduction. So you've already seen the healthy eating plate, and this is what it looks like. This is from Harvard, and they made it a little nicer, I think. And so you can look at this on your own after, but it's basically saying the same thing, but a little more specific, right? So eat a variety. Nobody knows, there's no science. I mean, food studies are impossible. We can't take people, you'll know, those of you who have studied some science, you know, these things are done with control studies and the gold standard, but it's really, really difficult with food, because all you can do is ask people, well, what do you basically eat, and watch them over long periods of time. But it's very rare that we can take people and like put them in a laboratory and just give them exactly what they eat for years and years and see, well, how do they do, and which ones get sick, and what diseases happen. And that's why we just have basics. We look over large populations and we say, well, these people, you know, in the Mediterranean diet, that works really well. And there's some people in Okinawa in Japan, they seem to do really well. And these are sort of the basics that we know. A lot of fruits, a lot of vegetables, the grains are whole grains, and the proteins we'll consider in that lean, and it won't be a lot of the bacon and red meat and cheese. And I know a lot of the things that a lot of people say, that's good stuff, but we say limit it. We don't say, you know, that you have to avoid completely, but this is towards a life of being very, very healthy and having a strong immune system. The plate method, sorry for the distorted pictures, but you get the picture. It's kind of saying if you can make half your plate vegetables, a quarter of it protein, and a quarter of it, what's the other one, whole grains, you'll be doing great. And they don't all have to look like this. So perfect. It might be that, you know, you're eating a burrito or you're eating pasta, and Kevin's going to do a great demo. I'm very excited, and I think you will be too. And you'll see, like, that can be your vision of half plate when we get into your Thai rolls. We'll go back there. So Michael Pollan, he's super interesting. He's a journalist, and he's a UC Berkeley, I think, professor at some point, but he does a lot about food and culture. And here's his rules. They're amazing rules. Look at these. He says, don't eat anything your great grandmother wouldn't recognize. That's a good rule. I mean, this is seriously the way we can learn. Don't eat anything with more than 5 ingredients. Look at those ingredients. If you can't pronounce them, if you don't know what's in them, it's a bunch of junk, right? Stay out of the middle of the supermarket. What does that mean? That means that a lot of the good stuff is on the periphery, and a lot of the stuff in between is going to be the processed food. He says, don't eat anything that won't eventually rot. Well, that's interesting, right? And it's not what you eat, but how you eat. Enjoy meals with people you love. These are all really interesting points, that it's also the feeling and that we have when we're eating is important. And don't buy food where you buy gasoline. That one's interesting. So these are more pictures to just show you it's a variety. It's not that hard. It's not rocket science. Nutrition is as much an art as a science. It's so many ways, but when you look at this, I hope you see that's beautiful. And you might say, you know what, I I don't like vegetables, or I only will eat carrots. Like my son, even though I'm a dietitian, he'll only eat carrots or broccoli sometimes. You know what? That's okay. That's a start. And eventually, as sometimes it's that we have the knowledge from the outside and that brings the desire. And sometimes we crave these things. So some of you may say, I crave a lot of vegetables, and that's great. And some of you may say, I'm working towards that and I'm not that into them. But that the more you eat, that brings you towards a healthier body, a healthier immune system, and a more balanced diet is better. So color your plate, and I'm not talking about M&Ms, just make it colorful, and you will be guaranteeing your health in much better ways. So these are all just plate inspirations. Real quickly before we get into Calvin, I'm just showing you like a splash. One here is from our house at the bottom. It's idli and sambar with a lot of like just shredded vegetables, and the other is, you can see what they all are, but you can see that, there are ways to look at that half plate vegetable that are more mixed up, and we're just having a lot of color. That's what you notice about these plates, I hope, is that they're very colorful. They're not just white and brown. If you're eating white and brown, throw in some color. And some of you aren't cooking so much, so that's why I have somebody, I think, in his dorm room right now who's going to do some demonstrations. So again, these are inspirational pictures, if you can see them. Some of them are like, hey, you're having Mexican food. Can you put in a few more vegetables? Can you decrease the cheese a little? And those foods are known to cause a little bit of inflammation in the body. So the cheese and the red meats, not so good to have a lot of those things. And if you love them, eat them, but see if you can start to reduce them and increase some of the other things. And that's a way that you can increase your health overall in so many ways. And so I don't have much time to go over this, but this is just to show you there's 3 macronutrients: carbohydrates. And what are our others? Do you all know them? I have a few people who can speak. What are my other 2 macronutrients? There's carbohydrates, and anybody know? They're very...
Is protein another one of them?
You got it, Aditi. Protein is another one. And I'll leave you in suspense for the other one, but maybe you can chat it if you know it. So there's carbohydrates and protein, and there's one more that maybe somebody's chatting. So these are the carbohydrates. Some people don't know or aren't able to recognize, well, what is that quarter of the plate? What carbohydrates are we talking about? And what you can see here is that it's as much kind of what we call junk food, the donuts and the sugar and the candy, as the things that we say, hey, these are good. So I don't want to label them necessarily good, bad. I don't want to get you into that's bad, never touch it, and this is good, and I'm bad if I don't have it. I mean, I know, and your parents have been telling you, and everybody around you is saying which ones to eat. Eat more fruits, more vegetables, more whole grains. But if you recognize them, that's the key, and you start gravitating towards these things and notice how it makes you feel. Most people will notice at some point in their lives that they feel better on these types of foods, because food is nourishment, right? And so these are whole intact grains. And you could have brown rice. You could also have basmati or other types of rice. You could have oats, quinoa, barley, whole grain, pasta, etc. Idli, dosa, all of these are whole grains. Starchy vegetables are also in the carbohydrate portion. So when we think of potatoes or peas or corn, if you were thinking of that plate, you would think of them in that carbohydrate section. And that's especially important if you have, say, I don't know anybody here, but maybe your parents, if you know somebody with pre-diabetes or diabetes, that becomes a very important point. Protein, that's what Aditi said. And when we look at it, on the right side, you'll see what we consider a healthier, more supportive of balance and health. And if you look on the left side, some of those things are known carcinogens. They're really bad. Some of like the hot dogs and the salami and the processed meats, they have nitrites in it, and they're not good for our health. We want to really limit these things. The red meats have a lot of saturated fat, and over time, these can really cause issues in our system and cause a lot of inflammation, which is not good for the immune system and health overall. So our best choices, all of the plant-based stuff you see here, the beans, the legumes, the lentils. I mean, if you eat any bit of an Indian diet at home, which I know some of you do, and some of you are like, I've had enough of that, I'll have something else. That's good stuff. all right? All of the beans, legumes, tofu, eggs, and the lean, better proteins to invest in if you eat meat are chicken and fish, and nuts and seeds are great too. And the other macronutrient, some of you knew and probably were saying, was fat. And fat, you see, it comes in all forms. And so, of course, it's in our sweets and in our fried foods, and that stuff most of us say, okay, I know that's not so good, but it's so tasty. And again, we're not saying don't touch this stuff ever, but just be aware and be aware that it has an effect on your body. So if you're really concerned about your immune function, health, balance, you will gravitate more and more in your life towards what you're seeing on the right. The good sources, the best. Olive oil is good to cook in. Avocado is excellent, though I know Kevin told me he doesn't. He'll tell us why. Nuts, any kind of nuts, great. Flaxseed, chia seed, there's some called salba seed. And if you eat fish, salmon or mackerel or these fatty fish have omega-3 fatty acids, which are known to decrease inflammation and therefore also have some effect on our microbiome. So as we're getting to the end, I was going to give you a little microbiology lesson in fats, which is really interesting and gets into trans fats, but we don't have much time and I want to get into the demo. I want to say this one thing. There is a difference between a treat and a snack. And this is just a nice thing to think about. A lot of times when we say I'm going to have a snack, we think of what I would call treat foods, right? And those are what? Chips, popcorn, sweets, cookies, things like that. We feel snacky. We want things like that. And so one great rule of thumb is that snacks don't need to be so glamorous. They can be simple foods. They're a bridge between meals. And if we're thinking about balance and health, we think of combining foods so that we're full. So it could be like the yogurt and raspberries. It could be a piece of toast with cheese. It could be peanut butter on a piece of toast. It could be a piece of fruit and a handful of nuts. It's not so interesting maybe as the donut, etc. But you could just ask yourself, is it a treat or a snack? And again, there's no insult. There's no problem that you're enjoying a treat, but just notice if all day you're saying, I'm having a treat, I'm having a treat, I'm having a treat, then you're treating a lot. And if you're concerned about health, that's in the realm of not supportive towards your health. Hey, I had a comic. This guy, I thought maybe you'd love this. He's saying, I feel like I finally figured out how to live life as an adult. Like eating, before I grab a cookie, I remind myself these aren't healthy. So I flip the box over, check out the serving size. What, just 2? Next, I look at the nutrition info and the ingredient list. These things are obesity incarnate. Now that these treats are laced with the bitter taste of guilt, I'm going to disregard everything I just read and gorge myself. Ha, ha, ha. But that's true, right? We have the knowledge and then we have choice. And, especially you're young, you may have some of these things. I wouldn't eat them with guilt. I'd eat them with joy, but I just start paying attention. The more interested you are in your health, you'll gravitate towards these anti-inflammatory type diets, which says the basis of them are eat a lot of fruits and vegetables, as we talked about, and then kind of go up there to the whole grains and the seafood or the legumes and the nuts and the seeds. And eventually you might see up there the herbs and the spices. I wanted to end on a note of, well, what really is known to be anti-inflammatory and help with lower risk for cardiovascular disease and cancer, etc. A lot of the herbs and spices that you find in your kitchen, turmeric is an amazing one. Ginger is great. And so you see some of these sage, tulsi, so many like this.